Can you predict the consequences of the event for India and the world? How harsh will the next leader be in case a coup succeeds? Okay, so in the scenario, there are two, three different possibilities, different scenarios. One scenario, which I find unlikely, but let's take it seriously for hypothetically. Yeah. So let's say an actual coup happens, and let's say someone like Xi Jinping is overthrown and somebody else comes to power. What are the consequences of such an eventuality for India and for the world? Yeah, and how harsh will this new leader be? So when a new leader, when somebody overthrows an existing leader, that new leader has to first prove himself or herself. Typically, it's himself in the Chinese Communist Party. So that leader will have to demonstrate to the Chinese Communist Party and to the people of China that he is visibly better than the predecessor. First of all, he will have to make multiple accusations of failure on the person who he has overthrown in order to justify himself coming to power and overthrowing that person. So he will have to say that Xi Jinping failed in this aspect and that aspect, and he allowed China to be humiliated in this manner by the Americans and by the Indians in this manner, or whoever else. He let the country down, humiliated the country, and so on and so forth. He has to put out a list of accusations, true or false, whatever, that doesn't matter. A list of accusations have to be made to justify his ascension to power and overthrowing the previous leader. And then he has to rapidly demonstrate that he is better and he will make things right. That typically can be a prelude to military activity or warfare or something significantly strong. Yeah, something that typically someone like Xi Jinping would not do in a haste or in a hurry. So if somebody actually overthrows Xi Jinping, then that person will have to take a belligerent stance against somebody somewhere. Maybe against Taiwan, maybe against India, maybe somewhere else, maybe Japan, maybe somewhere else. Yeah. So, maybe against the US. So against the US, they don't have too many military options open because the US is massively overpowered compared to China militarily, right? And even economically, the US is still very much the top dog in the world. So the Chinese don't have too many options of taking any strong measures against the US, right? They can ask their diplomats to go on an all-out offensive, but that's just words, verbal offensive, and they can't take too many trade measures because the US can retaliate. So there is not much they can do against the US. Now the other options are they have multiple territorial disputes. They will not right now open anything with Russia because they would like Russia to be on their side for the time being. So Russia is again out of the question. The US is out of the question. What does it leave us with? It leaves us with major nations, two major nations. One is India, one is Japan, and of course the Taiwan dispute, which is simmering. Now, again, when it comes to Taiwan, the Americans are very much capable of protecting Taiwan and preventing China from invading and successfully invading. So if the Chinese try an invasion of Taiwan, it's gonna end up disastrously, most likely for them. It will be a much worse loss of face and a much bigger humiliation than anything you can accuse Mr. Xi Jinping of having done. So that would be a disaster for the Chinese. So then we are left with India and Japan. So the Chinese could try something against India and Japan, and they could try something militarily. Now, when it comes to Japan, they have this dispute over the Senkaku Islands. The Chinese call them the Diaoyu Islands, right? So they could try to make a grab for that. Once again, the Japanese Navy is incredibly strong. The Japanese Navy is more powerful and more lethal than the Indian Navy. Please understand this. Their submarines scare the heebie-jeebies out of the Chinese. The Japanese have the best submarines in the world, bar the American submarines. Very good. Even their obsolete submarines are better than anything most nations have. Right, the Soryu class of various submarines. So the Chinese would be very reluctant to go up against Japan in any kind of thing because that could escalate things beyond what they would like things to go. That leaves us with India. They could try something with India. We know what the entire India Tibet border boundary is undemarcated, and the Chinese always have been pushing, nibbling away at territory, trying to nibble away at territory, changing the maps and putting Chinese names on Indian places and things like that. So they could possibly try something like the 1961 or 1962 war with India, a short, sharp, brief war that will give them a very rapid and very small military victory, which they would hope for, and then they can tell their and then the new leader can tell their countrymen that this is what we achieved, and we have re-established our whatever our status in the world, our that we are a major nation. So they could try something against India. The one of the likely places, let's take a look at the map, right? We should see the map. One of the likely places where the Chinese could indulge in a misadventure against India. Let's see the map, and I will show you where it is. I'm sure you all know if you've been watching this channel. One of the likely places is the Siliguri corridor, which is approximately 50 kilometers wide, right? It is currently a part of West Bengal for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, but the Siliguri corridor and Sikkim, that's one of the geographically thinnest places in India. Very small corridor, and that can be looked upon as one of the weak points in India's geography. And they could try and cut cut they could try and control the corridor through a military expansion, and thereby cutting off the northeast of India, the far east of India, from the rest of the nation. That's what they could try. Or they could try something in Arunachal Pradesh, take a bite at Tawang, for instance. Tawang monastery is one of the holiest sites in Tibetan Buddhism, and that's something the Chinese covet. So they could try and take a bite at Tawang or some other part of the of Arunachal Pradesh. Or they could try something further in the Ladakh region, in the Aksai Chin region, which they currently illegally temporarily occupy. So there are multiple places where they could indulge in a misadventure, maybe even in Uttarakhand, in this region, right? So there are multiple places they can choose from in order to indulge in a misadventure against India. They will calculate where they have the biggest likelihood of succeeding, and they could try something. So that is one possible scenario, right? So if there is indeed a coup, the new leader will have no option but to take some very strong action in order to justify his ascension to power and prove to the Chinese people and to the Communist Party that he belongs in the position of the paramount leader of China. So if a new leader comes into power, that leader is most likely going to be belligerent, and his actions will be substantially harsher than those of Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is playing the long game. He wants China to win by 2050 or so, right? He wants China to replace and displace the US as the global sole superpower by 2050 or thereabouts. So he's playing the long game. A new leader, if he comes into power through a coup, will have to play a very short game and prove very rapidly that he deserves to be the leader. So then you would see an unstable China, and unforeseen circumstances could emerge. Because if they try and take bites at Indian territory, the Indians will not just sit down and take it. India is going to fight back, and India is very capable of fighting back. India overall is economically smaller than China. India's economy is much smaller than China right now, temporarily. India's military strength is less than that of China, significantly. Yes, but if you look at the overall balance in the Himalayan region, India and China are reasonably well matched, and India has the ability to make China pay very extremely heavy price for any misadventure, because we have the ultimate weapon. We never want to use that, but if the Chinese cross certain red lines, they're going to pay the price for that. So again, that could be something that the Chinese would find undesirable unless they are really stupid. So that's what I see happening. These are the possible scenarios. I still feel that the likelihood of a coup having happened in China is significantly low. Most likely, what's happening is that Xi Jinping is conducting an internal purge of the Chinese Communist Party, and for that he has gridlocked the country, shut down most of the flights, most of the trains, and until this process is done, no news will come out of China. And this is how efficient and efficacious the Chinese system is. Such an enormous country, and no news is coming out of China. We don't know what's happening inside. That's how airtight and watertight their entire system is. No news leaks out that they don't want the rest of the world to know. So that is where we are right now. Obviously, the next few days we'll get more information, and let's see if I turn out to be right or if I turn out to be wrong. But this is what I feel.